I am invited to go on a walk. More people will be joining soon. The time and duration of the walk are set. The places wherever I am, wherever I find myself. No route is specified. I can walk in any direction I feel like or I'm able to. I can talk, I can listen, or just stay quiet. I can keep walking knowing that I'm not walking alone. In this moment, friends that I'm yet to meet are also walking, talking, and listening. I put my headphones on and step outside. The sun is shining bright, the sky is suspiciously clear. We don't get a summer's day mid March that often in this part of Europe. The air smells like wet grass and soil, morning mist that is soon to evaporate. I open my nostrils wide and inhale deep. It is the first time that I feel strong sunbeams against my skin this year. I used to hate walking. In Athens, where I grew up, sidewalks are usually covered in parked cars. So, in some neighborhoods where you can only walk in the middle of the street between passing cars and scooters, when I'm there, sometimes I stand on the side of the street and notice this synergy of vehicles and people, how they all move into each other's routes without accidents, mostly, by feeling how much and when to accelerate, to turn, to hit the brakes, jump, honk, or shout. Later, I moved to London, where walking is a competition. Whoever bypasses and overtakes the most obstacles wins. And when I say obstacles, I mean people. People are seen as obstacles, even though they're all on their way to a place. I now live in Amsterdam Nord. I'm walking around what used to be a shipyard between concrete construction sites and massive factory buildings now covered in graffiti and festival posters. A couple of blocks away, new towers are being built. Tens of thousands of more people are expected to move here soon. Amid construction noise and clicking spray bottles, a soft voice reaches my ears through the headphones. His name is Ian. His accent is clear, sounds British. I'm trying to place it on the map. It's London, maybe more to the north. His calm tone takes me in. Ian guides me in a quiet pilgrimage through grief. Steadily moving through my breath, he invites me into a world where the sculptor feels, the painter observes, and the storyteller listens. I am aware that each of us is hearing these words in a different environment. I know that we are looking at a different building, that we take different turns, but I also know that we are all walking, that we are all on a pilgrimage. The recording ends, and I keep walking in silence. A few seconds later, another voice comes in. His name is Riyad. What's that accent? Where is he from? I'm playing the guessing game again. And as if he can hear my thoughts, he says, what if we removed the question, where do you come from, out of all the world's languages? What would happen then? He says, belonging is so subjective that nomadism became my own way to survive. Where do I come from? Wanderers do not ask that question. We're all children of the sun. And I start to think of how many times I've been asked this question since I moved to Amsterdam, and how do I answer this question? How do I position myself as a wanderer in a city of wanderers? And before I go further into my head, I press play again. Zainab now introduces herself, and I can tell by the soundscape of her voice that she's also outside walking. I can hear the dog barking in the distance. I can hear the leaves throwing. I can hear the neighbor greeting her. I can hear the chickens clucking and the roosters crowing. And I am pulled out of the industrial north of Amsterdam and into a narrow curved path in the outskirts of Beirut that leads all the way out of city trouble into the village. I recognize this place even though I've never been there. She invites me to greet the sun and the plants, to see the same route differently each time I walk it, to notice the different colors, the day-to-day changes as trees grow and flowers blossom, the astonishing simplicity of nature, beauty that needs to be taken care of and beauty that takes care of us. I zoom out and draw a map in my head. I place pins where my companions are walking, then I run a thread around those pins and connect them. I look at this constellation of people scattered around the globe, experiencing similar processes within different realities, and I think of religious, and colonial wars, of population exchanges, of revolutions and genocides, of a shared history of pain, and how that history affects our daily lives and practices, even this walk. And in that moment, we paused and thought, is belonging a choice or is it imposed on us by a geography? I don't know the right answer. I don't know if the question is right either. I know that this moment and this thought were shared by me, Ian, Riyad, Zainab, and we shared them in a place that was created and existed, even if only for that moment. The pilgrimage continues. I am back at my studio, sitting in front of the computer, feeling helpless, carrying a grief that is mine and a grief that is collective, of being cut off, of being oppressed, of missed opportunities, of unfulfilled dreams, of unattainable desires for futures you know will never come. My grief turns into anger. How could we do this to ourselves? How could we do this to one another? When will this stop? And how the cameras are on. Mics are on, the pins on the map have connected, and we are looking at each other and we are sharing thoughts and food and thoughts on food and food for thought. The loaf of bread is the closest object to their camera, making it look huge on my screen. The rest of their table is stretching across the sides of my screen. I spread some plates with fruit and nuts around it as if the corner of their table extends through my computer screen and I'm sitting at the other end of it. This virtual space is shared. Fabio and Luca have joined our table all the way from Sicily. They are sitting squeezed next to each other on a sofa, trying to fit into the camera frame. In that same frame, there is also cigarettes, hats, plants, and a dog. They talk with passion about their latest endeavors and discoveries. The conversation is about growing plants in new soil, noticing what plants are already there compared to the ones we replace them with, the plants that naturally occur in a place versus the ones we want to see growing there. And they talk about seeds, new genetically modified seeds that only give one stable variety, and ancient ones, heirloom seeds. Heirloom seeds that contain all the DNA material that makes them grow in different shapes and forms. And my mind drifts off and my hand reaches out to the desk. And I open a drawer and my fingers dive in there, probing through keys and receipts and unsorted souvenirs. They reach a small pouch made of soft fabric. I open it gently and there is a pomegranate seed in there, a tiny pomegranate, like a miniature version of a real one. I hadn't seen it as a seed before. This was gifted to me on my last birthday in April by a friend of mine. Her mother sent it from Syria. You're supposed to plant it during the month of April, she told me. A year has passed. I should plant it soon. My father's favorite tree was the pomegranate tree. I remember he had planted one in our garden in Greece when I was 5. I remember the excitement in his face the first time the tree gave fruit. I really liked the idea of planting a pomegranate tree in my garden in the Netherlands. I can look at it and connect to my land, to the memory of my father, to the memories I have from my childhood around that tree in our garden. So I asked around, can I raise my pomegranate tree in the Netherlands? It turns out that I can, but I need to keep it protected for the first few months, maybe even consider raising it entirely in a glass house. And it will never bear fruit. I am now getting emotional on full display. Everyone on this call can see me tearing up on their screens. I focus on my breath, notice the movement, listen to the sounds around me, listen to their voices. They're now talking about language. The language we use to describe plants and how violently we impose human concepts on them, fitting plants in human-made categories, anthropomorphizing them so that we feel more comfortable. Like we do to ourselves and each other, using the language of nation-states to index, classify, and regulate human activity. Like we use the language of capitalism to rate the human experience. How many of our parts do we need to chop off so that we fit in these boxes? And are we products of protected designations of origin? Are we supposed to prove our purity and then put a price on it? And what is the actual price of purity? My grandfather was born at the top of a mountain in a family of nomads before the map was carved, before the lines were drawn, before the fields were sown in gun barrels and bullet shells. And as soon as borders started expanding, now to include that mountain top, belonging was measured on the basis of your language, your religion, or simply your name. Not belonging meant being chased, deported, or killed. So names were changed, language stayed inside the house, ways of practicing faith were switched, and now this boy who was to become my grandfather has been assigned a Greek name and the duty to prove his Greekness. Not out of preference, but out of necessity. Are you Greek? Yes. Do you love your country? Would you fight for it? He lived 104 years. He lived through almost the entire history of modern Greece, wars, famine, exile, dictatorships, a century of loss and grief, all in the name of a country, a place to belong. In the period of his life that I got to know him, my grandfather was living in a small village many kilometers away from where he was born at another mountaintop. There were not many relatives there or friends, just a small piece of land that he bought and started cultivating. He had his bahçe and his bostan with all of the fruit and vegetables, and whenever I would visit the village, the first thing he would do is take me by the hand and proudly present this garden, reveal its secrets, show me how to water the plants, and when is each fruit ready to be picked. Later in the 90s, he lived in Athens, close to his children and grandchildren for a couple of years, and then one day he packed his bags and went back to that village. And I remember that back then, his choice to return to the village didn't make any sense in my head. I could not understand that decision. Why wouldn't he want to be close to his children? Why would he want to work the land and milk the goats at 5 in the morning instead? But then growing up, adding up the wars and the displacements, the endless separation, the constant grief in this man's life, I see him being robbed of all elements of identity, his ethnicity, language, religion, culture, family, birthplace. I cannot see much left outside his little garden. In his personal ritual of creating, entering, and taking care of a place, I see his daily practice to unlearn, to undo, to fix the injustice, and I know that it doesn't stop with him. I am part of this process too. It seems I have inherited his grief and this need to make land, and I know that I'm not walking alone. I recognize this need in people around me. I see it in their eyes. People in the queue of the municipality or the immigration office, colleagues dependent on their boss for a stay permit, friends who live in anxiety for years and pass 1,000 tests to get a residency card, and friends in other places, much like our grandfathers a century ago, still struggling today with visas, border controls, and checkpoints, still being asked to chop off limbs to fit in boxes, all of them walking right now. I will go on walk with them in our different time zones and separate geographies, walking together, silent in our grief. And in that silence, one of us will start to sing, and another one will tell a story. And like this, listening to each other's stories and songs, we'll find ourselves walking in and out of each other's gardens, looking for a way to come together, a way to make place, a way to belong.